Welcome to KDRTV weekly shows. Today we are going to have Mr. Philip Kagushia, the head of communication, EACC, Kenya. He's going to discuss, he's going to tell Kenyans on the achievements they have made, especially in asset recovery. So let me welcome Bwana Philip Kagushia to the show. Welcome, Mr. Philip Kagushia.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
Thank you very much, Bwana Kagushia. So today is, we are continuing on the series which we had already started a few weeks ago on the fights against corruption in Kenya. And Mr. Kagushia, today we want you to expound a little bit more on the successes you've actually made, or the success you've actually made in recovering looted property or public property from thieves or from looters who stole from Kenyans. So it's a great opportunity for you to come forward. If you've got some evidence, then we want you to tell Kenyans, and Kenyans are listening from every part of the world. So Bwana Kagushia, go ahead and start telling Kenyans on the successes of EACC.
Once again, Bernard, thank you for having me. You remember we had this discussion about a month ago, and it is arising from that discussion because we realized we had so much to talk about that we decided to make it more topical. And today's topic is a very critical one. This is about the achievements of EACC in asset recovery. But before I go into asset recovery, allow me to send warm greetings from home to our brothers and sisters out there, wherever you may be. Salamu nyingi sana kutoka nyumbani. Now, going back to EACC, I think it's important to remind our viewers what the mandate of EACC is, because this will give us a good context. So the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is mandated to do both combating and preventing corruption. Now, combating mainly is law enforcement. Prevention is what we do with education, training, public awareness. There is also another mandate for EACC, which is about upholding ethics and integrity under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. But today we are firmly in the law enforcement side. That is the combating side. Now, a lot of people, when we talk about asset recovery, they ask us, what is this asset recovery and where are these assets? And in my view, the best way to give it is using a live example of a corruption case. And maybe if we go through it step by step, it will become clearer. So as you know, Bernard, corruption levels in Kenya are still quite high. And you know, the motivation for people engaging in corruption is to get something. Because they want to get something. And the internationally recognized definition of corruption is the abuse of public office or public trust for private gain. So what EACC is doing is going after that personal, private gain. And this is how we go about it. If you permit me, Bernard, I don't know if it is okay. Can I use you as a hypothetical example?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. So we have Bernard who is working here in Kenya. He's probably working in a public institution, maybe the county government. And because for all public officers, your salaries are known, your responsibilities are known, you even call something called a wealth declaration form. So the technical term for that form is Declaration of Income, Assets, and Liabilities. So we know Bernard, we know what Bernard is doing. He's an accountant in the county. We know he's earning, say, 100,000, and he has not declared any other source of income. So we know those facts because they're in the public domain. But what Bernard hypothetically does is he uses his position. And how does he use or abuse that position? When there is a tender, they manipulate the system. You will find perhaps Bernard has a briefcase company. He is masquerading as a contractor. And then you say you're going to come and build a road, or build a clinic, or build the county offices or the county assembly. Because you have manipulated this process, you have abused your position, you have won a tender, but you've won it irregularly. That winning of the tender is what we would now call the personal gain. Now, for our viewers out there, you may have noticed that because I've spoken about a procurement process which has been done irregularly, it means there is an offense which has been committed. Now, this offense, there's a criminal process, there's an investigation. The investigation at the conclusion will have recommendations. And the one recommendation that people are familiar with is that this person should be charged with corruption. But aside from that recommendation, you find the investigating officer gives another recommendation that assets should be recovered. And this is what I mean, Bernard. We find that you won a tender illegally, and the tender is maybe for 100 million. You have used your briefcase company, or you've used your spouse's company, or your child's, your other relative. And now we need to go look for the money. Why do we need to look for the money? I will explain that in just a second, but I want to give you an analogy of a road traffic accident. I don't know.
We had a technicality there. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I was saying I will use an analogy of a small road traffic accident, and I was asking you, Bernard, kama ushawahi pata kaajali kadogo barabarani.
Oh, sure. A couple of times, yeah.
Yes. So now what happens is the traffic officer will come and he will charge you for dangerous driving or reckless driving. But if you hit a border cyclist and he breaks his leg, you going to court and being fined or imprisoned does not restore the border rider's leg, which means ataenda hospitali, he needs medication, he needs treatment, he will be out of a job because he cannot ride his motorbike. So in order for him to get back to that position, in order for him to be compensated, normally that guy will take you to court in a civil matter. And in the civil matter, he'll be asking for compensation because he has suffered pain and suffering. He has undergone pain and suffering. He has paid medical bills, he is buying medication, and he has not been at work for 6 months while his leg is healing. So that's why you find a court passing a judgment saying, apart from the criminal element, which is a traffic offense, there is a civil element where you need to compensate this guy. It is the same thing with EACC. We can charge Bernard, take him to court. He can even be imprisoned for 5 years. But the money that the county has lost or the public institution has not been recovered. That is why we employ the civil method, with the civil path. We go to court in a civil matter and we sue you to return that money. Now, as you may be aware, there's a number of ways that money can be lost. If you're a public officer, Bernard, and you are negligent, you may cause loss to the county. If you have caused loss, we can ask for that money to be restored. The other way we come for it is when you have personally gained. You have personally gained that 100 million from that irregular tender, we will come for it. Now, it sounds very straightforward when I say it that way, but in real life, it is much more complicated. Because as you and I know, the moment you're paid that cash, you know you move it, Bernard. The next thing I know, you have bought an apartment in the leafy suburbs of Nairobi. You have upgraded your motor vehicle. You have invested in stocks and shares and things like that. You have even changed your lifestyle and you have taken up a membership at a golf club. So this money is not in one place. So what happens is the investigator at a very early stage, he approaches us, the lawyers. I know I had mentioned when we met last time that I joined EACC as a civil litigation lawyer, so he will approach us and tell us to go to court and file an application. That application is to freeze those assets. Because as you realize now, Bernard, if we do not preserve those assets at that time when they are intact, if the investigation takes maybe a year or two, by the time we get there is nothing left. So we need to move in very fast. We ask the court to give us orders, and we freeze those assets pending investigation. So that is what we call freezing, and the orders we get are called preservation orders. Please keep that at the back of your mind, because we are going progressively. So we preserve this during the investigation. At the conclusion of the investigation, there is a recommendation, and it says Bernard ameiba na hii pesa lazima irudishwe. So if this money needs to go back, now we file the main suit for recovery, and that is what we have been doing. When I joined EACC more than 10 years ago, majority of the cases for asset recovery we were doing were in relation to public land. They are still the majority, but most of the time it was public land. And you know, land grabbing in Kenya is a cancer.
It's a pandemic, yeah.
Kenyans do not want to see empty public spaces. I don't know what that is about.
Sure.
And there are probably people who are watching here who may have actually been duped or conned into buying such properties.
Sure.
So what we would do is we would go and do the investigation and go to the root, to the very bottom, and we'll establish that this land, even if it was 50 years ago, it was set aside for development purposes, maybe to be a market, or to be a hospital, or to be a playground. But somewhere in between, people have changed things, and now it has been converted to private use. Now, what I would like to maybe caution our viewers is that the person who does that shady transaction in the first place does not retain that land, because he's very smart. He's very clever. He knows if he stays with it, one day the law will catch up with him. So what does he do? He looks for an unsuspecting buyer, and he comes and offloads that property to you. Now, unfortunately, the way the law works is that it does not matter that you paid money for it. What matters is that that land was not available for being sold to you or being allocated to you. So unfortunately, we have very many Kenyans who have suffered this fate. EACC has gone to court. It has established that the land was public property, and we have got judgment, and the land is being returned to the original owners.
Thank you.
Now I know today.
Let me stop you a little bit, because we need actually now the discussion. Actually, Kenyans want, you know, we can give that explanation, but we really need now to focus now to for you to tell Kenyans exactly this and this is what we have actually acquired, because they have accused you. Kenyans always accuse your organization or your commission of speaking a lot. You have comprehensive procedures to do ABCD, but they want to see results. So can you specifically now give us some of those results? You've really talked, you've given us a perspective on what needs actually to be done, or how corruption is, and what you need to do for you to recover the assets. Now, can you come forward and actually tell us the successes now?
Thank you. This is actually the perfect opportunity to share our successes, because we have enjoyed quite a number in recent times.
Sure.
So I would like to mention that anybody who is familiar with a University of Nairobi property, which is on Galana Road, it's at the corner of Galana Road and Agwings Kodhek, is 5 acres of University of Nairobi land. That land had been grabbed by somebody, and somebody had a title, and we went to court and we got it back. But what is interesting, and this is what maybe I would like to leave in the minds of our viewers, is that when the land was valued, it was valued at 2 billion Kenya shillings. That is billion. Okay? Shortly after that, one of my colleagues instituted another suit, and he recovered 54 acres in industrial area, and that was land that had been set aside for the meteorological services. Not it was valued, it returned a value in excess of 5 billion. And those are just 2 cases. Okay. A few months ago, for those of you, I don't know, Bernard, if you recall where the old Kenya School of Law used to be on
Yes.
Ralph Bunch Road.
Yes.
Across from that institution was the house which had been allocated to or assigned to the principal. Now, the principal of the Kenya School of Law was supposed to be living in that house, and you can imagine how prime that property is. But somebody did some shady dealings and transacted that land, and it was sold off to someone else. We recovered that this year, and it returned a valuation of 700 million. Now, those are just a few examples, and they're replicated everywhere. It is not just Nairobi. I was giving Nairobi examples because maybe people will be more familiar with them.
Sure.
But if you go down to Mombasa, where I worked for a few years, you will find a major recovery of the Uhuru Gardens on Moi Avenue. If you've seen photos of Mombasa where they are
sure.
the elephant tusks,
Yes.
Yes, that is a public park, and somebody, a private person, had title to that land. Again, that is one of the things that we have recovered. These recoveries are replicated across the country. They are there in Eldoret, they are there in Kisumu, they are there in Kisii, pretty much every corner of the country. Even Charlie Islands, we have recovered public property. We have even recovered a beach, what is it called? A reserve, a marine reserve, where turtles go to hatch, to lay their eggs and to hatch in Malindi. And we also recover that. So when you do the valuation for all those properties, clearly it is in the billions. And I would like to say this. The reason I am mentioning the billions is to give our viewers context. One, if you look at EACC's budget, because you know every time somebody talks about EACC, at some point you will hear that we have some challenges, some constraints. EACC's budget is about 3 billion. So if one recovery from one case returned a property of 5 billion, you can see Kenyans are getting value for their money, isn't it, Bernard?
Sure. That is perfect.
So that is,
yep.
Yeah, that is why it is important for us as EACC to be given these opportunities to come and tell Kenyans that in the context of what we are doing, we are actually giving value for money. So I've just given you a few examples, but the aggregate sum in terms of recoveries right now as we speak is 26.5 billion. And that is a figure I would like our viewers to take with them.
26 billion Kenyan shillings.
20.5 billion. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, 26.5 billion Kenyan shillings. And this is a span of how many months or how many years have you recovered these properties?
This is in the last 5 years, but the ones I have mentioned to you are all within the last 24 months.
Wow. Okay, so the last 24 months, can you sum it up for us?
I may not have the exact figures, but it's approximately 10. Because as I mentioned, yes, one property was 5 billion, another one was 2 billion, the others were 700 million. We have Kenya Railways houses in Kisumu, which were valued at 550 million. So there's quite a number. So in the last 2 years, it may be in excess of 10 million.
Thank you very much.
10 billion.
Thank you. Yeah, 10 billion. That is perfectly good. Once again, viewers, thank you for watching. Click and follow KDRTV News for more updates when we will go live with our guests. Some of them, Migona. We are also planning to have the Deputy President. We are also planning to have Musalia Mudavadi. We're also planning to have more information from the EACC, who are really trying to fight corruption. And today, Mr. Kagusha, we have got viewers who have a few questions. So let me quote one of the questions, or ask one question, or read one question from our viewer. She's called Elizabeth Adero. How are the new leaders going to deal with corruption? That question might not actually go to Mr. Kagusha. Are they planning to recover? Okay, planning to recover grabbed lands. Already Mr. Kagusha has explained. Okay, with the debt going up every time, what are the solutions they have going to stop it, still run the economy? That one is not for Mr. Kagusha. Okay, thank you. These questions are not for Mr. Kagusha. This is just a general question, but we appreciate that Ms. Elizabeth Odero, you actually viewing. So, Mr. Kagusha, thank you very much for this information. And What your strategic plan to ensure that you recover as many as possible parcels or property stolen from Kenyans? What's the strategic plan?
That's a very good question, Bernard, because I mentioned when we last spoke that we receive about 7,000 reports every year, and only half end up being in our mandate, but it's still more than 3,000 reports per year. So it is not physically possible for EACC, which has about 700 staff, to investigate 3,000 cases. It is not physically possible. So the strategy that EACC has adopted is to deal with high impact cases. Now, high impact cases, the cases have high impact because of the value involved, the personalities involved, and public interest in the matter. So, if I can give by way of example, the 5 billion parcel already is high impact because of the value. That is the highest value asset we have recovered. But in some cases, it is the personality involved. You will find a very high-ranking public official is involved in corruption, and that also creates a lot of public interest. And in some of these cases, we have recovered properties from very high-profile people. I may not mention the names now, but
sure,
we've had people in county governments, we've had people in national governments, and we have recovered property from them. The other thing I would like to mention, because it's very important, if you give me a minute, is a recent phenomenon we are dealing with, which is called unexplained assets. I don't know if you have come across that, Bernard.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Somebody like a poor person like me, and in the next 2 months, I'm a billionaire. So I understand that. I'm trying to put it easier for our viewers to understand, yes.
That is exactly it. And we all know them because we live with them. We are related to them.
Sure.
Your relative goes and joins, he becomes an MCA, and then in a year he's constructing buildings in town. So what happens with those cases? Some of the people who are involved are fairly high profile also. And you remember at the beginning I mentioned a public officer will have completed his wealth declaration. But because he is stealing, he's not going to put the money he has stolen in his wealth declaration because it will raise eyebrows. So we look at that wealth declaration because it contains your known legitimate sources of income. We know you have a salary, you probably have a small business, maybe you're farming, ama uko na matatu. All those things are fine because they're legitimate. The question is, why is there such a huge disproportion between your legitimate income and what we find in your accounts or the property that we find you with? And again, we use the same civil process. And if I may just mention, the civil process, unlike the criminal justice process, the criminal cases have a much higher threshold of evidence. Mm-hmm. But for civil matters, we are a little bit lower, and we are talking on a balance of probabilities as opposed to beyond reasonable doubt. So when you're asking about strategy, EACC is using this as a strategy. And we go to court and we demonstrate that there is a huge disproportion. You acquired these assets at a time that you were reasonably suspected of engaging in corruption, that you were given an opportunity to explain, and that your explanation was not satisfactory. And that is how we go for those assets. And if I may just mention very quickly, Kenya has now 6 successful unexplained wealth cases. We are ahead of very many people, including the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has only 1. Kenya has 6. And the personalities involved are also high profile. The very first one involved the MD at Kenya Ports Authority in Mombasa. That was 74 million. The next one involved an accountant at National Water. That was 41 million. The next one involved a chief officer finance in Nairobi City County. That was 317 million. Just one person. Mm-hmm. He had an explained asset worth 317 million. Mm-hmm. More recently, we have got judgment against an accountant in the Ministry of Interior, 112 million. This is just an accountant in the ministry. Mm-hmm. Recently, we had a case, I don't know if you have come across it, for a valuer who works with the National Lands Commission. We found $170,000 cash in
Yes.
her house.
Yes.
In addition to that, there was extra 1 million in Kenya shillings. So totaling 18 million. She could not explain it. We have recovered that. And the most recent one involves, again, another person who was in the Ministry of Finance, and we got a judgment for 65 million. That was last month. So as you can see, we are on the job. The pace is not slacking. And what is interesting, especially for the very last case, the 65 million, that gentleman was working in the Ministry of Finance when the Anglo leasing contracts were being executed. So we can find a connection between a historical crime, because that was more than 10 years ago, and this person having assets he cannot explain. So I'd like to tell our viewers that some cases may take long and the wheels of justice may go very slowly, but it is slow but sure. And that is how we caught up with this guy who was working in the Ministry of Finance when Anglo leasing went down, and we've got a judgment for 65 million against him.
Thank you very much. For our viewers, please subscribe. Please follow us on or YouTube, Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are going to churn information. We are going to bring you experts. We are even going to bring you Wanjiku, so that Kenyans can have a deliberation on how to move their country forward. We are having Bwana Philip Kagushia, who is the head of communications, EACC, and is trying to expound a little bit more on their success part as commission in Kenya fighting the elephant in the house called corruption, which is actually making our country to go into debt. Bwana Kagushia, I want you to passionately tell Kenyans again what they need to do in order to help you win the fight against corruption. Tell Kenyans what do you expect them to, what do you expect from Kenyans?
Well, the first thing I'll say is, because I heard you telling your viewers to follow you, I will also be requesting them to follow EACC. The first thing they can do that is by going to the EACC website, which is eacc.go.ke. A lot of the things that I am talking about are there. But we are also available on other digital platforms. You can track down at EACC Kenya on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and even LinkedIn. So that is where all the information is. But now I'm really addressing Kenyans passionately and telling them, and this is a message which has been repeated by our CEO, Major Twalib Mbarak, that we cannot win the war on corruption by ourselves. It is not possible. So we require the support of our fellow Kenyans. And what is the first thing that Kenyans should do? The first thing Kenyans should do is abstain from corruption. You remember that campaign that was in Kenya for combating HIV, and it started with abstinence. Well, I think also for us and the war against corruption, which in itself is a pandemic, we need to abstain from all acts of corruption. The second thing that we will be asking Kenyans to do is to be reporting any incidents of corruption that they witness. And I would like to assure people who would like to report to EACC that the reports can be made anonymously, and they can be made on those platforms that I have mentioned, but specifically on the EACC website, eacc.go.ke. You can put your report there and it can be anonymous, so that you can be protected as a whistleblower from any sort of retaliation. So having told people to abstain and told them to report, there's something very important that I would like our viewers to hear in terms of how they can assist us in fighting corruption. Bernard, you know we are going into an electioneering period very soon, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Now, we sometimes are responsible for the leaders that we elect. And we elect leaders who do not have integrity, and then it comes back and we shoot ourselves in the foot. So one of the messages I would like to be sharing is that because we will have an opportunity to elect leaders, I am asking all our viewers, all Kenyans, to elect leaders who have integrity. If they do those three things, you abstain, you report to us, and you elect leaders with integrity, we will have taken a huge step in the war against corruption.
Thank you very much, Bwana Philip. There is a gentleman called Mandela Nyokwoyo. He's asking, Mr. Philip, the Langata playground, which is in public, how come it has never been recovered and returned to their rightful owner? The law is clear, but unfortunately, you only go for individuals who do not have godfathers. This is just one example. Do you have any knowledge about this information? You know, I'll ask questions as Kenyans actually put them there. We don't fear anything, but if you don't have any information, you'll definitely just let it pass. But if you have got some information about this, this question, you can ask. You can answer that question.
I am not sure if Mandela is talking about a playground or is it the Langata primary land. What I can say, because it is in the public domain, is that there are deliberations about how to resolve that matter. And because some matters are under inquiry, I may not divulge the details of what is transpiring.
Good. That is perfectly okay. Now, the other thing that you have actually mentioned, or you have told the Kenyans, that our problem is the leadership. You know, fighting corruption, for you to succeed, you must have leaders at the top. You must have good judges who are passionate about their country, who are corruption-free, for us actually to succeed. Now, what do you tell our leaders, especially who are at the helm, in order for them to help you or to ensure that we win the fight against corruption? What do you tell our leaders?
I would like to maybe correct the notion that it is just the leaders, because the leaders, they don't get there by themselves. We are the ones who put them there. And we also suffer a little bit because maybe we are not knowledgeable enough, or maybe we are also have the same weaknesses they have. Maybe we are also susceptible to some type of lacking in integrity. So we don't see it as a very bad thing if someone else who is lacking in integrity ascends to office. But with regard to what our leadership can do, it's not very complicated. You know, this is our life. These are our lives. We are living these lives. And there's always an opportunity. It's like faith. There's an opportunity for salvation. So if you have a leader who has been going through ethical dilemmas and engaging in acts of corruption, you know, he has a choice to stop. As you speak right now, you can say, hii maneno ni mbaya na nimewacha. Okay? But the leaders who are doing a good job, the only thing they need to do is continue supporting EACC. And I would like to say that EACC has been receiving support. And I can give you an example of some of the support that we receive. When we go to defend our budgetary allocation, we more often than not get what we request. And EACC's budget has been seeing a slight increase year on year for the last 2 years. The reason I mention this is, again, to give people context. If EACC has a budget of 3 billion, yet EACC is able to bring back over 20 billion, it means Kenyans are getting value for money, and it means we are getting support from the right places, and we're getting support all the way from the highest office in the land, and that's the office of His Excellency the President.
Thank you very much. We've had our president passionately speak about fighting against corruption, but some other times he has also carried up his hand and said, "You see, you EACC, you're the ones who are supposed to be doing the job, not me." Now, what do you want to tell the president? You know, you have talked about a capacity building, and definitely when we look at the figures and the numbers and the cases you are actually having, they are pretty many. So are you asking the president maybe to add you more, or parliament or whoever, to add you, or the public service board, to add you more workers so that you can attain your efficiency, or what do you think?
Bernard, you know, it may not be in my place to make that kind of a comment or that kind of a request. There are people who are charged with the responsibility of doing those things. But what I can tell you, because we are fairly confident about it, is that the president knows what we are doing. He knows the job that we are doing, and that is why I told you that I am confident we are getting support from all quarters, including the highest office in the land. Resources are always scarce. Hata nyumbani, you have to budget and say, so what will I do? Will I buy a vehicle? Will I invest in property? Will I take children to school? And that happens everywhere. So even EACC it's not unique. We would love to have more people, but we have to do that knowing the realities of our circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, that this is a hypothetical for me, because from your explanations, the question I decided to put that question forward to you, based on what you have actually told us. You know, you have 700, and you have thousands, if not millions. Let me just call it. We have millions of cases, even those small cases in the county level. You know, without workers, you cannot succeed, my brother. So maybe you need capacity building so that you can manage to get as many as possible. Even court processes to ensure that you acquire more, and then you curtail the issue of corruption in Kenya. That's why hypothetically I put that question for you, and thank you for answering it. I know you are not the CEO to ask that one, but for Kenyans want to understand exactly what is happening. And in a few minutes we are actually going to end the discussion, or the live discussion. So if you've got questions, please bring them forward so that Bwana Kagusha can answer them. And I can also tell you that this is not the end. Bwana Kagusha will be coming, definitely, if not Bwana Kagusha, but we'll be receiving at least one or two individuals or people from the EACC, so that they can help us. We are here to ensure that our country move forward. That is why we are here for you. So for viewers, ensure that you follow us on Twitter, follow EACC on Twitter. You can complain there. You can put your information not on Twitter, but they have got their mechanism, which Mr. Kagusha will still repeat. Now, my last question, Bwana Kagusha. This time round, you've told Kenyans to ensure that we get good leaders, so that Kenya can be at least corruption free. But is this viable, really? Is it viable? Because, you know, our Kenyans, Kenyans believe that those people with a lot of money, they are the good leaders, and they'll bribe their way. And this has been repeated in cycles of elections here and there. So what's your suggestion on that?
I'd like to start by saying I don't think there's any place on the planet which is corruption free.
Sure.
And that is where you have a corruption perception index, because even the country that is at number 1, it simply means they have low levels of corruption. And that is the aspiration we should have as Kenyans, is to reduce the levels of corruption to a level where, or to a position where it is not crippling us entirely. And that issue of getting leaders is important. But here's the question that maybe I can throw back to you. If somebody is giving you 50 bob to vote for them, one, should you take that 50 bob? But even if you take it because you might need it, do you have to vote for that person?
That is a good one. That's a good one. Let me not say it from a public TV that go and take money but vote for them. That is a decision they need actually to take by themselves. Whether to take the money or vote for whoever they want to take it. That is a decision actually they need to make on their own volition. And then I believe we have come to the end of the show, or the deliberation. But I've promised our viewers that we'll be having more of these deliberations in the near future, at least once in a month. So you'll be logging, we'll be telling you. So if you want to get this information, ensure that you log in. You follow us on Twitter, you subscribe on Facebook, same to EACC, so that at least Kenyans can know exactly how we are fighting corruption using our mandated commission of EACC. So, Bwana Kagusha, do you have any closing remark, please?
Yes, my closing remarks is that we should not lose hope in this fight against corruption. Part of the reason it seems insurmountable is because we are bombarded with reports of corruption all the time. But from my perspective, it's not always a bad thing, because it is reflective of that freedom of speech and that space. And that is why we say even the media, people like yourselves, Bernard, are our partners. You may find something through investigative journalism and you can share it with us. But simply because we are seeing a lot of corruption being reported, should not let us lose faith. This is our country, this is our home, we are fighting for it, we are fighting for it because of ourselves. We want to live in a good country, but we also want our children and our children's children to live in a better country. So let us not lose hope and continue striving to do the right thing.
Thank you very much. My name is Omweri Kebwato, and we've now finished the deliberation with the EACC. In the next coming shows, we'll be informing you prior, but as I've actually told you earlier on, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, so that any information or any guests we are bringing, you will definitely be informed before the show. Thank you very much. May God bless you.